short the diplomatic expressions, what exactly is Europe trying to achieve this time when having a high-level discussion with China?
Well, I think Europe would like to see that China goes from rhetorics to action. We and the member companies of our chamber, we have felt that China has raised expectations for us. We talked about the G20, we have the Davos speech, we had document number 5 from the State Council, and the openness expressed during the BRI summit. Now we would like to see that translated into some real action. So actually we are hoping that the two sides will commit to advancing the comprehensive agreement on investment.
Rhetorics to action, isn't that also the hope from China, I guess, toward the European Union and Germany as well?
Of course, we also would like to Germany and the European Union more work on Chinese investment, also more China market access, and so of course this is both sides hope a new reality. I think to the China-EU cooperation now go beyond the bilateral meaning, push forward the globalization, global governance. I think this is also new hopes for both sides.
All right, if both of you gentlemen say so, let's get down to work. The first thing that we need to look at is the general background of everything that is right here with us. First of all, G7 summit. It did not conclude with much success. According to Chancellor Merkel from Germany, talking about Europe has to find its own independence, apart from the US and also apart from the UK, which is looking at Brexit right now. But it is harder said than done, I guess, Mr. Harborn.
Yes, but perhaps out of this situation comes a new reality for Europe. Maybe this will make
Not
Europe.
Maybe it is already.
No, I was going to say that I think Europe may now have a chance to become more unified internally, because now Europe really matters. Europe matters inside of Europe, and Europe matters in the world. And actually now Europe and China relation also matters.
Does that provide more momentum to develop further relations and more in-depth relations with China from your perspective, Mr. Harborn?
Yes, it does. And if China also wants that, I think we have a very good opportunity.
Good opportunity or not? We're not, of course, Professor Wang, as you are a scholar of international relations, talking about zero-sum games. If somebody getting closer to the United States or the UK, that it must be against China. That is not going to be the nature of our relations these days, just to be complicated more than that. But Professor Wang, what kind of opportunity does that present China with? With much action, will things ever be changed toward a very different thing as we are having right now?
Well, I think China-EU cooperations now maybe more be expected because of the President Trump, who want to quit in the climate change, even idea, and also globalization. So China and EU are the most supportive of the global governance, multilateralism, and globalization. Of course, there are different approaches of the globalization. The European side may be more rule-based. China's side, I think, is more development-oriented. So this would also have some confrontation of the Belt and Road Initiative, the summit. But the new potential cooperations, like I think like e-commerce, and also about the service trade. So I think China-EU still has a long, a complementary lists of corporations in the future.
Professor Wang, you have to explain yourself. Why is it apparently so-called rule-based approach and a development-oriented approach could be quote-unquote controversial when they are being combined together?
Yes, for example, China-European Union, the bilateral investment treaty negotiation may be dealt with many labor rights, human rights, public procurement. This is European standard, very high. But China, we are said, we are a developing country. Right. But the EU side consider China as not just a developing country, maybe it's a challenger and more competitive competition from the Chinese side. So this is I think it's asymmetric relations, but the European side focuses on the reciprocity and then make some confrontations.
Mr. Harborn is ready to explain that.
Yeah, no, but I think China has had 15 years no, 16 years since its accession to WTO to become a more.
But you are not recognized Chinese market economy.
That's a political issue. Yeah, that's a political issue. But I think now is the time really to go towards more rules because we are working now in a global area where we need the same rules to function. And we believe that China has the opportunity to take a leadership in a multipolar world. It's basically US, Europe, and
Work
China.
together with the European Union.
Yes, and together, and therefore we need to have some common rules, and that is the point of Europe. And I think if we do this now, the upside is so tremendous. Actually, we talked about the asymmetrical relationship. Look at the investments between China and Europe. Right now, Europe is investing much less than China, and I think that is not the way it should be. If we compare the Chinese economy to the size of the US economy, of course the foreign investments into China should be much bigger than what they are today. But that will come when there is more market access and rules that foreign companies feel comfortable with and safe and
you have
secure.
I guess that the spotlight is really on these two gentlemen together while we are talking about this. You know, I have to let Professor Wang to go a little bit further about what Mr. Harborn just said. You know, one thing is rule-based should be the fundamental of the relations between so-called EU and Germany's relations with China, or actually it has to be, as what you said, some specific barometers. For example, recognition of China as the market economy, recognition of China as an important player on the international stage, and therefore China exercise its own capabilities in different fields. Which comes first? Is there a sequence here?
Well, Chinese mentality, we say, is seek the truth from the facts. The facts that China and the world is very diverse, it's very dynamic, developing. You cannot have the single high standard like TPP. Why failed? Because it's high standard, exclusive. So we should learn from that lessons from the United States. That China-EU cooperation is more focused on the reality, not too much a high standard.
May I bring it down to perhaps a lower level? I think the promise made at the third plenum that China should allow the market forces to play a decisive role in resource allocation. For that to happen, there needs to be a level playing field. And for a level playing field to function, there needs to be a common set of rules.
Right.
I think that's the starting
point. We're talking about different things. First of all, we should talk about from the perspective of our own, which is, according to what you have done, how much you're contributing to the overall relations of the development for China and EU relations and China-German relations. So, Mr. Harborn, I understand your point. According to China's third plenum, for its own purposes, China needs to open its market. But from the EU's perspective, what has been done over the past, let's just say, 1 or 2 years, since things are beginning to change in the world, that it is helping with the momentum of China-EU relations?
Well, I think Europe has said all along that it would...
Said is one thing, doing is another thing. So what has been in actual term done?
We have been deeply involved in the negotiations for a bilateral investment treaty, and this is a very important basis for our future cooperation. The other thing that has caused problems is then when we had trade friction caused by overcapacity sold in Europe and causing disruptions to European markets. This is not helping politically, and that is also something Europe has tried to explain.
Mr. Wang, what about what China has done over the past 1 or 2 years to contribute with the momentum of the bilateral relations?
We have the overall reform. I think this will make remarkable achievements.
What kind of reform you're talking about, Professor?
Like anti-corruption, like reform of our state-owned enterprises. And as I said, they made the market take a decisive role. I think huge progress. But the EU side is, still not satisfied because the EU side fails many competition, not only from the United States, Japan, but also domestic Chinese enterprise. That makes the purpose.
Is that competition normal according to you, Professor Wang?
Of course, it's normal because China, market economy. You should, according to the WTO rule, welcome competition.
Mr. Harborn.
I want to give credit here because today we launched our business conference survey and we asked our members what they think about reform in China.
Your members mainly are German companies and European companies?
No, European companies.
Yeah, European companies.
Yes. And they say that when it comes down to corruption, they're very happy about the progress in China. The issues that remain are on the regulatory side, where our member companies want to see more progress.
All right.
But the problem is you encourage the rule of law, and the three laws that China passed, you against the law on the NGO, the law of the internet, the law on the anti-terrorism. But you should support China's rule of law. But the European side definitely openly against that law. This makes the Chinese government confused.
We are in favor, but it's sometimes when it happens in a way where we don't fully understand if we are treated the same or if we are discriminated against. That's when we speak up.
Okay, we have to make it a pause for this point, but what about the other point? We have seen some tremendous growth of trade between China and the European countries. In fact, China has already become the largest trading partner for the EU countries as a whole, and also largest trading partner for Germany, where you, sir, are originally coming from, and where the Chinese premier is landing for the very first stop here this time. So, but others argue mercantilism is not necessarily going to solve all the problems or the challenges ahead. What do you make, Mr. Harborn, of the role trade still plays this time in the relations between China and the EU, given the fact that we earlier talked about the overall change of the international relations structure?
Well, the continued openness of international trade is tremendously important. I mean, if we are to achieve solutions to the problems in the future, and be it the environmental problems or going up the value chain, it requires trade and integration into global supply chains. So, I mean, this is a given, I think.
But having said that, though, what can be done about trade? I mean, we cannot just rely on all the previous practices to wish them could prosper in the future and give us more momentum, but rather some new mechanisms, new thoughts of thinking. For example, some would say, what about Belt and Road Initiative for the European companies? And what about other platforms, for example, within Asia, or among Asian countries, and yet European countries could also play a role? What do you make of this shall I say, what do you make of this different kinds of platforms that can be used?
Well, I think these are all working in the same direction, facilitators of trade, be it infrastructure as this great vision of the Belt and Road Initiative, or be it global convergence when it comes to standards and rules and regulations. These are important things to facilitate trade. So I think we're on the right track.
On the right track, how fast can it be? Of course, Chinese always talk about, let's do it overnight. That's not possible when you involve so many other players on the same stage. But yet, there is an efficiency and a purpose that we're talking about here.
Even about the multilateralism, China-EU cooperation, of course, is not just bilateral, but it's also about multilateral. But this is now the small multilateralism, also European Union should support, but not so support like 16+1. The CEE countries, actually the economy, market economy.
Central European and also Eastern
European countries. Their economic growth much better than other places, particularly in South Europe. So now there's a new dynamic of the China-EU cooperations. Chinese government always highlights that our cooperations under the 16+1 framework.
That you have to explain once again for our audience.
Support of the China-EU relations, not that. But European side always, particularly Germany, views of the negatively that it's dividing the rule of Europe. Even the thing about building the new Great Wall within the European Union, many need to understand about that.
Okay.
And also China-EU Euro Express, the train from the continental, also is the boom of our economy, particularly trade. It's also good.
All right.
Perhaps we are back to the issue of regulations. What Europe is saying is that we have our 10 initiative building a trans-European network for transport. We want that integrated with areas outside of Europe, but it has to follow the rules and the procedures that we have laid down in Europe. I think that is where the conflict area is, possibly.
The rules in Europe and also the cooperation in Europe are extremely important for the European countries. And yet we do understand it is also itself a multilateral platform. And therefore consensus has to be built among all the players because of the nature of the European Union and eventually come up with momentum. But Mr. Harborn, the argument is, will that be on time? Well, you have other competitors from all over the world trying to grasp the same piece of pie. I guess that's not a question just for EU and China relations. It's a question for EU with any kinds of relations with the outside world.
Yeah,
I know you yourself cannot handle that issue alone, but
no.
I do want to ask from your opinion because you're a business leader here in China.
Yeah, the diversity of Europe is at the same time its strength. Then, of course, Europe, as we as the European Chamber, we say that Europe has to speak with one voice. Europe has to find a common policy ground in the important issues. This is important for us as business people.
Okay,
yes,
let Mr. Harborn continue, and please finish your point, sir.
No, that was my point, that we want Europe to speak with one language.
Okay, will China have the patience?
Of course, we always support the unification of the European Union, even more supportive than some member states of the European Union like UK, actually.
When the Chinese premier is already in Germany and to go to Brussels for a final discussion for this trip with the European Union, what do you think should be some of the pragmatic expectations, gentlemen, that we should have for this trip?
One, I think because last year, unfortunately, there's no joint statement of the 18th China-EU summit. This is very unusual because of the controversial on the Chinese overcapacity problem, that the European side are very concerned about the steers and overcapacity.
Yeah, so your point is?
Now, so joint statement is very important to summarize the 2 years progress. The China-EU cooperations under the President Trump and under the current difficult situation, I think it's more and more significance push forward the globalization.
What do you expect should be in that document?
So two new, I think we should expect. Firstly, is about the China-EU cooperations over the sea, the blue year of the blue. So maritime cooperations, maritime Silk Road.
All right.
No, 6 European countries, they claim we are the destination of the 21st century maritime Silk Road. Italy, Holland, Germany, UK, Denmark, and Norway.
Second point?
Second one is, I think, the service trade and e-commerce. I think the new high for the China-EU trade relations.
It is not fair. Only let Professor Wang to give a conclusion. Always we go to you as well, Mr. Harborn.
I hope that a strong commitment to an early conclusion of the comprehensive agreement on investment will be one point. The other point, which is really important in view of the US, is that we firmly commit to the Paris Climate Accord. This is very important. These two things I hope to see.